Good evening and welcome to another edition of Down to the Wire. I'm your host, derbyologist, and joining me again this week is Camping with Candice. Candice, an exciting weekend of racing. Normally the 4th of July holiday has a lot of stakes races, and really we could have picked anywhere from across the country, but we decided to kind of hone in on Belmont and then the Los Al Derby, since we've kind of been talking about some of those horses this spring, and it does look like it came up a good field with that. But let's start first, the Belmont Derby. I think a lot of people, when this race was announced, were hoping that some Europeans would come over, and it looks like we kind of got our wish here.
Yeah, it definitely looks like that. I mean, maybe we even got a few more than I had expected whenever it was originally announced, but a good field all in all. I think, as far as the American group of, kind of the better horses that on the turf going a mile or further, we kind of got all of them here, I think, and then plus a couple European invaders, which is exciting. You have to think the field's going to be led by Bobby's Kitten. I fully expect him to be the favorite here. He, of course, comes off of a win over at Penn National, and, on the turf, he's really tough and for sure one of the best of his crop. I'm not sure he really wants to go this far, and that's kind of the story with most of the American horses here, is that they haven't run this far. And so it really is kind of a question of whether, which one of them wants to go this far or if they can. As far as the American horses go, I tend to prefer Mr. Speaker. When he ran down at Gulfstream in the Palm Beach, he finished second there to Gailo Award. He was flying at the end, and that was over a mile and an eighth. So, I mean, he still hasn't gone this far, but he just, had the presence that he maybe would enjoy to go further than that. Gailo Award has won over a mile and an eighth twice, but I do think both of those wins are deceiving. I think that he looked very, very tired at the end of both of those, and the wide draw here doesn't do him any favors. Global View is another one who could possibly do well at this distance, better than some of the others. Bobby's Kitten and Dance with Fate, I think, are two that are going to take a lot of money that I don't really think want to go this far. As far as the international group goes, you have to think that Toast of New York, who won the UAE Derby, is going to get a lot of play here. I don't really like him in this spot. I think he really had kind of the trip of the century over in Dubai. Was on the front end and really just, kind of dawdling pace up front and just kind of ran away from them on the all-weather surface there that can be kind of speed favoring. His races prior to that, he won them, but they weren't the classiest of races, I guess I would say. They were kind of cheap races on the all-weather over in England. So Toast of New York isn't one who I really want here. For me, it kind of comes down to a couple horses. Aidan O'Brien's since in Adelaide. He's very exciting. He finished second over at Ascot just a couple weeks ago. If there's anything I have against him, it's that this is kind of a quick turnaround. But, Aidan O'Brien seems to be really good about appointing his horses here and having them fire when they come here. But like I said, it's maybe a little bit of a quick turnaround for me to like him on top here. Another exciting one is Pornichet. This is a horse who used to be trained by Nicholas Clement, and he's now trained by Guy Waterhouse, who she trains down in Australia, and this is her first runner over here in America, which is really exciting. I mean, she's a world-renowned trainer, so it's good to see her sending a horse over here. And he just recently finished third in a classic race over in France, so definitely some form there for him. If anything, I think he might want a little bit softer than he's going to get here, but definitely a classy individual. All in all, my top choice is the French horse, Gailo. He's, far and away, I think he's done everything he could this year. He's had 3 races. He's won all 3 of them. If anyone's going to put off anything on him, it's that he's not running in the absolute top company, but that's because he can't. He's a gelding, so he can't run in the classic races there, which is why he's here. And I kind of like that because I feel like he really has been pointing to come here because he can't run in those races. Whereas, like Toast of New York, they've kind of flat out said, we're bringing him here because we're avoiding Australia, pretty much. So, whereas I think this was the plan all along for this horse. Like I said, he's 3 for 3 this year. He's never finished worse than second. That was in his debut. He clearly wants good ground. So for me, Gailo on top. I'm intrigued by Pornichet. It gets a little murky after that, but that's what I like on top.
I want to talk a little bit about Toast of New York, mainly because I think I guess I'm not really sure what the story is. I remember on Dubai Morning, we watched him win, and I kind of read about this horse over the winter, and he definitely seems to be a poly freak, as you may want to call it, kind of a frack daddy type. And after that win on poly, they said they were going to skip the Kentucky Derby, and as a handicapper, what do you do? Like, there's no workouts. He hasn't raced since March 29th. You know they skipped a turf race, and now they come over to America to run in the Belmont Derby. I guess it's kind of a puzzle. I don't really know what to think.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think he prefers synthetic. I kind of agree with you that it is like you don't really know what his form is or how he's coming into this. But I think for me, the thing that really made a statement is when Jamie Osborne said, "We're skipping the Epsom Derby to come here," and that just made me think that they were avoiding that race. I mean, I guess I could understand not wanting to run against Australia, who of course won that race easily, but if you're completely skipping a classic, that makes me think that you didn't think you were going to get in the money and that you think this is that much of an easier spot. And it certainly is an easier spot, but I don't know if it's that much easier. So it makes me kind of question how good he really is.
Two more horses I want to talk about. One's been in my stable mail for quite a while, and his name is Sheldon. And what's interesting about him is he's a son of Purim out of a Dices mare. And back probably right about the time you were born, one of the best handicapping angles in turf racing at Santa Anita was playing any Dices on the turf first time, and a lot of them absolutely loved the 6.5 furlong distance. And so this horse has some old school turf breeding. It's got an old mare, and he looks like a total closer, but I think he's one of the few horses that is actually bred to go 10 furlongs of the Americans, and he's a long shot.
Yeah, he definitely has. I mean, he just recently broke his maiden over Hines, who I think is a Tappet, if I remember right. And yeah, I mean, he's been running this far. He has won over this far, and even though that was just a maiden race, you can't say that with for so many of these other horses. I mean, you definitely can't say that for Bobby's Kitten, who you think is going to be the favorite.
Bobby's Kitten to me is a bet against. That last race, he got an easy, uncontested lead, 48, short stretch at Penn National. Like, they say the worst bet in racing is to take a horse who had everything going his own way and now has a lot of different factors. He's got to go 10 furlongs. It's only his third race of the year. He's actually facing classier horses. Yet on the other hand, I mean, raw talent. I mean, if he runs a race that he did last November, they may just be chasing him all the way around the track here.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, really with him, it's the distance. I think this is too far, and even though he can run further than a mile, I think that really is his strength, that mile distance. He'll be on the front, and it's going to be one of those things that some of these horses, the jocks are going to have to be aware. You still can't totally just let him go. I think like Gailo Ward will be up there. Flamboyant he's French bred, but he does race forwardly placed more often than not. Mr. Speaker can be up there, so I would expect some of them to be up there just making sure he doesn't just take off from them. But I really think this is too far for him, and even for Dance with Fate, who I know a lot of people are talking about, I'm thinking it's too far for him as well, or borderline at best.
One of the things, you were doing some research on a lot of these horses, and for the most part, they're always pretty low odds, and they're going off favored. So for the first time, I think we're going to have a pretty spread tote board here. I wouldn't be surprised to see 5-6 horses between 6-1 and 9-1.
Yeah, for me, that's what I'm excited about. I think especially, if like how we said, like Bobby's Kitten is, kind of a bet against for both of us. For me, I'm a little bit wary of Dance with Fate. Then you're starting to get into several horses who I think are going to be, pretty good odds. And I'm inclined to think, except for the Aidan O'Brien horse, except for Adelaide, I think all the other Europeans are going to be square prices as well.
Looking forward to the race, and I've read a little bit of chatter about possibility. Maybe this could be eventually a turf triple crown, and I know we've talked about that. Maybe racing needs to come out with more big days and more ways to present the product rather than the same old, let's just do a daily double and let's do this. I mean, maybe this can kind of start I mean, I think that's what New York is trying to do with some of these big days this year.
Yeah, and I think even days like this, ultimately, it benefits all the other days. I mean, the fact that we're getting, horses from big-time trainers who've never sent runners over here before coming for this race, I mean, that could be a domino effect. She may very well send a horse over here in another race if he does well, So I think that in of itself is exciting, to be getting a little more variety, a little more than just the Coolmore, Aidan O'Brien, occasional European. We have, a little more variety here.
Now, the next race is the Suburban Handicap, and it's a Grade 2. It's a $500,000 purse. It maybe not a Grade 1 type field, but definitely a lot of quality here. How does the pace set up for you, or what was some of the most important handicapping factors for you in this race?
I mean, the pace I don't think is going to be, ridiculous. I think it's going to be a little bit contested up front. I see, Storm and Monarco and Moreno, of course, will be up there, and maybe those two will kind of go at it for the lead, but I don't think that they're going to kill each other by any means. So I don't think pace is going to be too big of a deal unless maybe you really want like a deep closer. For me, this race, though, it kind of came down to, just form and how are these horses running right now. And before the Met Mile, I had kind of said that if you're not playing Palace Malice, I really quite liked Romansh in that spot. And he ended up running a big race. He got third behind Palace Malice and Golden Sense, and he was kind of wide all the way. I mean, he was in a good spot because he was forward, and clearly the horses who were more forwardly placed, it was served to be a bit advantageous in that race. But he was wide all the way, definitely wider than Palace Malice and Golden Sense throughout that race. So for him to finish third, just 1.5 lengths back, that was really nice to see. I think he's a horse with a lot of talent, and it just seems like he's really starting to come into his own now. So he's kind of the one who I'm really excited to see here and to see what he does, because he's been, kind of a type in the past to show flashes of talent, but maybe not necessarily be able to string, 2 or 3 good efforts in a row together. But I think that this is, certainly a softer spot than what he faced last time. So I like Romansh on top. I'm thinking hopefully he can build off of what was a really good effort last time out over at Belmont. But there's some interesting ones. I mean, even a horse like Vijak, it's crazy because it seems like he was gone for so long after last year. First he was on the Triple Crown Trail last year before getting injured, and he's had a couple races back, and maybe he's struggled a little bit. So it'd be interesting to see if a horse like him, or Mylute or Moreno, some of these horses we saw last year who they've kind of fallen off the map a little bit, to see if they can kind of get back on course in a spot like this.
Yeah, for me, I think, Romansh is interesting just because he hasn't put 2 in a row or 3 in a row together, but individually, any one of his top speed figures kind of tower over this field. Mm-hmm. I guess my biggest opinion in this race is I'm really anti-Last Gunfighter. I just think he has a string of very narrow victories, and those are the type of horses I don't like playing when they actually face full fields and they're not going to get the perfect trips. I think Mylute is actually taking a little bit of a drop in class. He's a horse that when he puts together his A race, he is capable. So I think he has potential here. Visually, I was very impressed with Norumbega's win the last time. I also have a feeling that the Belmont track was pretty fair that day on the Belmont Stakes Day, so I think his visual win, I'm intrigued by Norumbega, and he's faced some of these horses before. The one thing I do want to mention, just the with experience comes knowledge angle on me, is that I've been around the block a little bit, and over the years I've seen Moreno, the connections of Moreno, the owner and the trainer. On one year on Belmont Day, they won with a 40-1. On another year on Travers Day, they won with a 41. Both those horses looked absolutely pathetic, and if you look at Moreno's current form, he looks absolutely pathetic, and that's when I say that's when he's dangerous. So I'm telling you right now, there was no way you could have handicapped those horses. They waited for a full field, they waited for the big handle, and they cashed. And to be honest with you, they admitted it after the races they cashed. Mm-hmm. They have cashed tickets in the past on big days, and they know how to get the form ready and really dirty up the form. So if you are the type that likes to have any type of angle, Moreno is actually live in this race. Even though on form, on the paper, it shows nothing. This is just one of my gut instincts. Moreno, I think that last race was a classic. let's get the odds up, muddy up the form, and we're going to wait for a big day. And it doesn't get any bigger than this. But visually wise, I like Norumbega.
Yeah, that's interesting, your point about Moreno, because it has been a bit perplexing, his form this year. Because, I mean, I think last year, I don't think any of us were saying he was, grade 1 caliber, but he just always seemed so tough and so gritty, and, I think he really took a lot of us by surprise in the tail end of last year, and this year just kind of hasn't backed that up at all.
So, yeah, I remember one of his fillies at 40-1. Had come in off back-to-back losses of 35 lengths, and it smoked the field. So, trust me, I'm just saying I've been around the block, and this ain't my first rodeo, and something tells me that horse isn't as bad as those last 2 races indicate. But he's not my top pick. I'm just saying if you want a horse that doesn't figure that could pop the board, you just never know. My top pick is actually my Lute, and then I like Norumbega. The Oaks, kind of another. We'll go back to the turf. Well, what do you think about the way they carded this? The Derby first, and then the Suburban, and then the Oaks.
It's a little weird. Maybe if it was me, I would have switched the Oaks and the Derby. I don't know. I mean, I think the Oaks is a more it's a more compelling race for me from a handicapping standpoint, but maybe the Belmont one's more competitive. I don't know. I'm just so used to having the guys second. I guess I would have just flipped those two.
Okay. Well, I know you're excited. I know when the nominations came out, we were both looking at them, and we were chatting back and forth and saying, oh, I wonder if this filly's going to come, or I wonder if that one's going to come. And some of them came over here, and kind of who, I know you've got some scouts over there in Europe, and who they've been telling you about.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because in this race, I actually don't like a European. I know everyone tries to say that I pick the Euros in every race, but here I don't.
Euros in every race, Claire. Candice.
No, but here I don't. I actually really, really like Room Service for this race. I think she's just been on killer form, 2 back. She dead heated with Roslyn in the Ashland over at Caneland. She came back and backed that up in a big way, beating, Diversity Harbor and the Showbiz Gold, and, that was a tough field that she beat over at Santa Anita over this distance. She's, so she's won in a grade 1 at this distance, so there's no questions there. I think she's going to be mighty, mighty tough to beat in this race. It doesn't mean it's not compelling, though. We do have a few European horses coming over. One of them is Excellence. I mean, the form is there. She's racing at a high level, which is nice. She just most recently finished a length plus a short neck behind in it's a Phillies Classic race. So she's placing in these classics, which is nice. So I mean, she definitely has up there at the top level competition over in France. And one thing I can say is, with this year's 3-year-old crop, it does seem like to this point the French fillies have been a little bit better than the British fillies. So her finishing 3rd in a French Classic is maybe a little more compelling to me than a British filly finishing 3rd in, like, say, the 1,000 guineas. The one thing I don't like about Excellence is I do think that she wants a little bit of cut in the ground that she's not going to get here. Unfortunately, it's probably not going to be self-ground by any means. Wonderfully is an Aidan O'Brien horse. She's interesting, except that her form as of late has been really bad, and I just really don't think that. I don't see any reason why it's going to turn around here at all. So she'll probably take money just because of the connections. People like to bet the Aidan O'Brien Coolmore horses here, but I don't know. I just kind of don't see it. Of the Europeans, Flying Jib is maybe the most interesting to me. She definitely wants this ground, but she's gone nowhere this far. So, whereas in the Derby, it seems like all the Europeans are the ones who, there's no questions about them. Here in the Oaks, there's a lot of questions about the European fillies coming over. Flying Jib's the most compelling of them to me, but I far and away prefer Room Service to her. Maybe an interesting one at a price is My Conquistador. I mean, she was so good last year. Finishing 4th in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf. Had some issues, so didn't come back this year until May. Finished for 2nd on her debut for the year. So, if she improves a little bit, she could definitely be in there. I mean, the talent is definitely there. We've seen it. But again, she's another one that's distance is a little bit of a concern. So for me, I think room service is going to be really tough. I'm intrigued by my Conquistador. I don't think she's going to be that price. Morning line 12-1 seems a bit crazy for her. If she's that, then I'll be all over her. But those are really the two that I'm looking at.
What kind of, for people that didn't get a chance to see some of the, I know you were paying attention to Rosalind's race over there. What happened with Rosalind in that last race?
Oh, in Rosalind's race, she didn't even have a chance. She broke from the gate and she threw the rider at the start, so we don't really know what it would have been.
So for me, I think you kind of throw out that race, and it sounds like maybe she just didn't have a chance. And I was impressed with that dead heat win. I've always kind of been a fan of Rosalind, even going back to a couple of her dirt races. She kind of another one that got a little bit behind in the spring, kind of like my Conquistador. You're right. It seems like that my Conquistador always seems to get bet. She was bet pretty hard in the Breeders' Cup, and then also she was drafted pretty high in our fantasy league this spring. So she kind of has a reputation, so I'm not expecting her odds to maybe float up as much. I like Flying Jib. One of the things I always do with the Europeans is Oasis Dream probably tends to get more milers, but Dermot Weld, I've done some pretty good research on him, and it seems like with a lot of his horses, what I usually do is add about whatever they're running over there in Europe, I can usually add about 2 furlongs. So you're going to say, well, he's only been running 6 and 7 furlongs over there. That only gets you to 8 or 9. I don't know. I just have a feeling he's one of those guys that points a horse for a race, and I think this one may have been pointed, and they're taking advantage of the Lasix as well. Like maybe they know that she has a breathing problem or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, with her, definitely one thing is, she wants this ground. Like you said, she's by Oasis Dream, who I tend to think of him as a little bit more of a synthetic sire, but, definitely wants firm ground, of course. And I think what's interesting about this race versus the Derby is in the Derby, aside from Bobby's Kitten, there isn't a ton of speed in there. So I can almost see that race being like a mob finish at the end with like 10 closers or 8 closers. But here I think we're going to get a genuine pace in here. So for a horse like this, who's probably going to be held up a little bit, I think she's going to get a nice pace to run into. And in a few of her races, I mean, I can say like 2 back, this was last year, her last race of last year, when she won over at the Curragh, she definitely looked like she, could go for a little bit further. I don't know if quite this far, but a little bit more distance, definitely could suit her.
So for the record, I'm one of those people that says Candice always picks the Europeans.
Yep,
that's me. So I'm going with Rosalind and Flying Jib, and then who are you kind of leaning towards?
I like Room Service on top, and then I like Flying Jib and my Conquistador underneath.
Sounds great. Now we go from the cozy confines of Belmont to the longest stretch in America, and we've been excited because the defending 2-year-old juvenile champion gets to take on the pride of Arizona and also the Puerto Rican sensation here in this race at Los Al.
Yeah, we've been waiting for this one. I think we've mostly probably been waiting for Shared Belief to come back, and so we were excited when he initially came back in Golden Gate, but he's going to be back here in the company he deserves to be in now. You've got to think he's the one to beat here. I mean, I'm not going to get too cute with this race. He's far and away the class of this field. I'm not worried at all about him running on the dirt, so that kind of argument doesn't really bother me. I just think he's so much better than everyone in this race, and second start off the lap, I mean, he already looked impressive in his first start, and I expect him to look, a little bit better even here. So Shared Belief is, far and away the one to beat here. When you try to get underneath, I think it gets a little more interesting then. If you give him the win, like I basically am, then it gets a little more interesting. I mean, you've got to think Candy Boy will be second favorite here. I really actually prefer Top Fortitude to him. It seems like Top Fortitude's really coming into his own now. Ever since he won over at Santa Anita in the Lucero Barrera there. So I kind of think that he's actually the biggest threat to Shared Belief, if there is one.
I think the 2 major concerns for Shared Belief, one, he's got to go, whenever you have just one sprint to go to a route race, and then two, he's running on dirt for the first time, and then Los Ale has officially now the longest stretch in America somehow, 1,380 feet. Do you think any concerns there?
I kind of don't. I mean, he's gonna come from off the pace. He tends to be one who's forwardly placed, and he stalks the pace, and he comes from up it. I just think, for him, he's always been so, he settles so well, and he just responds right when he's told. So I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be able to be just fine, regardless of the length of the stretch run. And, even though he's going from one sprint to a route, I mean, there's several horses in here who, haven't been running this far either. They've, most of them have been going about 7 furlongs, so it's kind of a jump up for everybody for the most part, maybe minus Candy Boy.
For those of you who haven't been following along, Candy Boy was my Derby pick, and, yeah, he had a rough start at the beginning, and he checked, but he was never going to be involved in that race. There was, the way the race played out, he would have got shuffled too far back, and the pace, I wanted the field to get spread out. So he really, even if he wouldn't have bumped into horses on the backside, I don't think he would have fired that day. I do think it's a pivotal race for him, because this is a horse that, if you go back to the one horse that actually gave Shared Belief any type of trouble, and that was all the way back to the Cash Call Futurity, he had a nice comeback. I think this is kind of a defining race. Like, if he doesn't win or seriously compete in this race, he's probably not that good, yet a win here, and you can start talking Travers or Breeders' Cup Classic. I just think this is a big race for Candy Boy. I'm going to go with him. Even though we haven't seen a race yet to start this meet, we're recording this on a Wednesday night, I think this stretch run is going to be a long stretch. I see plenty of speed with Tornado M and Shared Belief and Top Fortitude, and I think Candy Boy, if he is going to be a good horse, his best race is making one sustained move, and the last 3 races he's been trying to get into position. I want him to lay back 7-8 lengths and just make one move.
I know there's a couple horses in here coming from the same race over at Santa Anita with Can the Man and Friends with K-Mill, and do you think either of them could be a factor here? Because at the very least, they've been routing when most everyone else hasn't.
Friends with K-Mill, I had a couple of trip notes on him, and the pedigree is kind of interesting. I think he fits in this race, and I think, I guess I would maybe throw him in an exacta box. I'm not sure if he would be, realistically, I think Shared Belief's a class. I'm going to take Candy Boy just because I do think there's some trip angles, and I think the odds will be right. The horse that intrigues me a little bit, sometimes when horses ship across the country, they just don't run their race. And I think Top Fortitude ran his race in the Woody Stevens, but I think Tornado M didn't. And I think a lot of people remember when he got second to Top Fortitude, a lot of people thought he was the best horse in that race. So if you want to play an angle, maybe he just didn't ship as well, and now he's going to be higher odds, and the Puerto Rican sensation for Sig Mendoza may be live here coming back to out west.
He might. I prefer Top Fortitude of the two, though I do have Shared Belief as my choice in this race. I do think the biggest concern for him is Top Fortitude, even though he hasn't been running this far to this date. His last 2 races were really impressive. Him and Lazaro Barrera. We talked about that race on here, and neither of us were really even considering him, considering how badly he had ran before that. So for him to, bounce back and run as big of a race as he did there, considering he was up front on, what was a fairly hot pace that day. So, that was really impressive. And then to come back and finish second in the Woody Stevens. And yeah, he was well beaten by Bayern, but, Bayern's raced a lot more than him, and Bayern is, consistently raced in a tougher company than he has. So, and I don't think there's too much shame in that. I think Bayern really is the horse is coming into his own. But, for him to even beat Social Inclusion there, I think that's a big deal. Social Inclusion ran 3rd in the Preakness, and for him to beat him there, that was really nice. And he didn't have the easiest trip in the world there. So, that could have been it. He might be cycling out of form now. That could have been like his race of the year. I don't know. But, I think if he runs back to that effort or close to it, or maybe even back to from 2 back, I think he has a definitely chance here of finishing second.
Basically the Belmont's kind of the last what traditionally we call the last race of the first half of the year, and then July 1st we kind of say, okay, now it's time for the second half of the year, and this is when horses like Tiz Now and some other horses in the past, you have big races like the Haskell and the Travers. What is your opinion of Shared Belief? I mean, do you really think this horse can go 10 furlongs and win the Breeders' Cup Classic, or do you think he, what is his upside? Can he beat a California Chrome? Come on, Candice, tell me.
I think he can beat California Chrome. Shared Belief to me is a puzzle because he was such a good 2-year-old that we expect him to run back to that, but maybe he was just kind of an early maturing type, and maybe he'll never quite get back to there, because we obviously didn't see him for so long. We're kind of figuring that out now. Whereas you talk about like late maturing types, and I kind of scoff a little bit at California Chrome because he was really, really good, but I don't know how he's going to run in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Whereas, say a horse like Medal Count is a horse who I think is really coming into his own, and I think he'll, a horse like him could be one who could really feature in the second half of the year. So I haven't really seen Shared Belief enough this year to know if I really think that he's still maturing or still has room left to improve. But maybe we'll get a little bit of a sense of that here.
What about Barron? I mean, he freaked in the Woody Stevens, but I mean, some people said, well, he got bumped in the Preakness and he got rushed because he got scratched out of the one race, or did he just freak at 7 furlongs and 9 furlongs really isn't his game either?
I don't think that he wants to go as far as some of the others. I think 7 furlongs or a mile is really a very nice spot for him. But that race was really impressive. But I mean, at the end of the day, the horses he was in with, I mean, I just think he kind of, maybe it was impressive the way he did it and by how much he won by, but, dueling with Pure Sensation, okay, well, he should win that duel, I would say. He was more seasoned than maybe every horse in that field except for Kobe's Back, who can't break well. So it was a race he should have won, but he did it really impressively. He's one we're going to find out right away, though, because I think he's going to the Haskell.
Well, it should be an interesting weekend of racing. United Nations is this weekend, the Queen's Plate, and some other guys are coming back out on the East Coast in a prep, and then we start to hit. I think it's going to be interesting because I think Cal Chrome is definitely going to be taking 6 weeks off. A bunch of other horses are already injured. So really, we're going to be down to Tonalist and Medal Count and possibly Barron, and then I think Shared Belief is kind of the wild card. I mean, if he, to me, I always respect an undefeated horse, and at this point he's still 4 for 4.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, his running style, he has, the tactical speed that lets him be in any race. He's never a horse that you really look at him and you say, oh, he's pace compromised. He's not going to be able to win here, which it's nice. I think, a horse like Bayern, isn't nearly as versatile. So I just think maybe even his running style and class alone is going to put him in a lot of races.
Sounds good. Well, last week, we should quick mention, you were able to tab Majestic Harbor in the Big Cap, and that was partly on trip notes, but what's the game plan with Game On Dude here right now? It seemed like Fury Cap Corey with that 45 kind of just took the heart out of him.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of try to stay on here. I almost think it's a mental thing. Like, people are saying Game On Dude is done physically. I'm not sure I quite believe that yet. I mean, if he got a race where he got the lead and then he got run down, okay, well, maybe I'd get on board with that. But I've always thought with Game On Dude, it's kind of a mental thing. He's a bit of a different horse when he's out in the lead. It was kind of similar, if you remember last year, like to Verrazano. When Verrazano was on the lead, he was a completely different horse than when he was like shuffled among horses. And I think Game On Dude's the same way. He likes to be in front, he likes to be in charge, and he likes things his own way. And, as amazing as Game On Dude is physically, mentally, I don't think he's the strongest one around. And when things didn't go his way, I think he kind of checked out a little bit.
Well, unfortunately for him, I just don't see. If I was a trainer, I guess I don't feel sorry for Game On Dude. I mean, he's won $6 million, so I just don't think anybody's ever going to let him get an uncontested easy lead. I mean, why would you not throw a speedball in there at a very minimum then?
Oh, exactly. I mean, I'm surprised it's taken this long because that's always been the knock on him. I mean, every time he doesn't win the Classic, people say, well, he needs to lead. Well, if we all know this, then do something about it. I mean, you're kind of screwing yourself over if you know, if you like flat out know a really good horse's weakness and you aren't doing anything about it.
Well, it should be a great weekend of racing. Do you think any of the Europeans might stay over here in America, or do you think this is kind of a one-and-done type thing?
I don't know. I mean, it'll be interesting to see. I could probably see, a couple of them going over to Arlington. I think there's a big 3-year-old race on the Arlington Million undercard, so some of them might head over there. I would think like United Nations Side Glance is running there, and he ran in over at Arlington last year, so he's maybe one who could stay over.
Well, what's on tap for Camping with Candice? Are you going to spotlight any other races, or kind of stick with these?
I'm gonna look at these. I'm gonna look at the United Nations when we have the entry list. I'm gonna look at the Queen's Plate though. I think We Miss Artie is gonna be really, really tough there. There's only one other horse who I think maybe could give him a little bit of a fight there. As crazy as it is for people, maybe American racing fans to think We Miss Artie is dominating in Canada.
All right, there she is wearing a Florida State Seminoles jersey and telling everybody that We Miss Artie, of course, that he's cracked up to be. So, Queen's Plate, always a fun race. Another weekend of great racing. We'll talk about this and these races and more next week on Down to the Wire.